This video discusses an article called Neoliberalism and Neoliberalism by Joseph Nye. It appeared in the World Politics Journal in 1988. Joseph Samuel Nye Jr. is an American political scientist. He is the co-founder, along with Robert Keohane, of the international relations theory of neoliberalism, developed in their 1977 book, Power and Interdependence. He has been a member of the Harvard faculty since 1964. In 2014, the magazine Foreign Policy reported that the international relations scholars and policy makers both ranked Nye as one of the most influential scholars. Now I will proceed to the article. Theorists of international relations suffer from being in the middle of events, rather than viewing them from a distance. This prevents them from being entirely neutral. This means that theory has always been strongly impacted by political concerns. In the early 1970s, there was a strong theoretical opposition to the theory of neorealism, sometimes appearing as an overreaction in combination with political events. For instance, strong opposition to the Vietnam War resulted in opposition to the neorealist balance of power theory that endorsed that war. At the same time, transnational corporations and NGOs developed strong and influential networks that the theory of neorealism could not account for. Morgenthau, as a realist, also voiced this concern. He wrote that
the forces now ascended appear to be leaning toward a global society without a dominant structure of cooperation and conflict. This is a polyarchy in which nation-states, subnational groups, and transnational special interests are all vying for the support of individuals.
By the late 1970s, this mood shifted again. Even though US President Carter seemed to oppose the militaristic policies of Reagan, the power politics of states seemed to lead Carter to grow much closer to Reagan again. Conflict with the Soviet Union again strengthened the legitimacy of realist analysis. In realist logic, the use of force is calculated in a cost-benefit frame. This cost was now much higher than in the 1950s. This led to a learning in the nuclear arms area. Liberal theories involve the impact of international society, domestic society, interdependence, and institutions. In its simplest form, this theory is easily discredited, but in a more complex form, liberalism lets us understand how the interests of a nation are defined, which it subsequently acts out in the balance of power arena. Without interests, there is no action. We also discover how states can learn. For instance, why would Bismarck act differently than Hitler? Realist theory does better at explaining interactions rather than interests. But if we only use the concept of power in the explanation, we miss the bigger picture. States act in their self-interest, but that self-interest is defined by that same state as well. Liberal theory saw the rise of regional integration theory in the 1960s. The concept of regimes was introduced, as well as with influences from international law. Still, in the 70s, liberal theory was only on the fringe of the field, and Waltz's book,
Theory of International Politics,
cast doubt on the role of interdependence in the decision-making process of states. Waltz is also a major neorealist figure. In the conversation between realism and liberalism, we discussed 2 books. These are Richard Rosenkranz's
The Rise of the Trading State
and Robert O. Keohane's
Neorealism and Its Critics.
Rosenkranz argues that an open trading system now enables states to change their international positions in a more drastic way than military conquest does. Next, Keohane thoroughly maps out the dialogue between Waltz and his critics by including chapters from Waltz himself, some critical essays, and lastly, the response to those critics by Waltz himself. Keohane shows that Waltz effectively made neorealism into a coherent system rather than adding much to it himself. Waltz further claims that human nature lies at the heart of state-power rivalry, but Keohane reproaches Waltz of explaining too little by explaining too much. If human nature accounts for everything, then the concept loses its explanatory value. Yet, he uses neorealism to provide a broader structure of the international world that is very usable to be employed in practical terms, to explain why states do specific things in specific cases. Waltz does modify realism, where he says that power is not an end in itself which is pursued by states, but power is a means to a different end. That end is security and a balancing of power. Waltz did change the traditions of classical realists such as Machiavelli and Thucydides. These authors did not use a positivist epistemology. Waltz does attempt to do this, where Waltz again lacks explanatory power, where he fails to account for changes in the international system over time due to social evolution, such as the emergence of territorial power politics after the collapse of the medieval feudal system. Still, Waltz sticks to a theory that explains the broad structure, where he cannot be touched by the appearance of unit-level interactions. An example of another such interaction is the deployment of yet another army, the development of yet another nuclear weapon, or the outbreak of a single war. This also allows Waltz to dodge the responsibility of making false individual predictions, because his general theory on why states do what they do is supposedly still true. These things stand apart from the broader form of causes. Keohane takes issue with this. He compares it to economics. Microeconomic theories fail to explain the behavior of firms using their rational choice theory. In the words of an economist, the danger of a clinical profession is that
the models become more real than more explicitly descriptive reality.
Now, the revival of liberal theories will be discussed. While liberal theories are diverse, the core of it is a concern for liberty and how to achieve it. This correlates to an interest in limited government, institutional restraints, and open contracts, such as trade contracts across borders. 3 strands of the theory exist. First, commercial liberalism, which emphasizes the role of trade. Second, democratic liberalism, which emphasizes the peacemaking effects of republican government. Third, regulatory liberalism, which emphasizes the importance of rules and institutions. Fourth, sociological liberalism, emphasizes the impacts of transnational coalitions and how they transform the system. Rosenkranz's work fits in commercial liberalism. He argues more for the beneficial effects of trade than for the other strands of the theory. He does not share the illusions of some other liberals, however. He realizes that trade is not omnipotent and that it could not prevent the outbreak of the world wars. In his view, this territorial linkage of trade interdependence only started in a political homogeneity after 1945. Because he is cautious, we can read him in two ways. The first way is to read him in a strong form. This is close to classical commercial liberalism that says that trade necessarily leads to more peace and cooperation. The weak form introduces a dualistic interpretation of trade, where trade is a condition but not the sum total for peace and cooperation. What is also dualistic about this view is that he leaves room for neorealist theory. States trade with one another while also accounting for the power balance between those same security-oriented states who pursue their own interests. Last, directions for future research in the dialogue between realists and liberals will be discussed. We can usefully employ rational choice theories and game theory as research strategies, but they run the risk of falling under the realist structure, which does not allow them to explain much at all. We should also apply game theory to organizations rather than just states. Rosenkranz's work reminds us that we must explore how states and non-states work together in the area of trade and power. We must then also pay closer attention to the effect of norms and institutions in this arena. Another way to explain this cooperation between neorealism and neoliberalism is to explain it as an integration of structure and process. Imagine a poker game. The structure refers to the chips that the players hold and the cards that they hold. The process refers to the rules of the game and also to the ability of the players to calculate the odds and to bluff. We need both aspects to similarly explain the game of international politics, and both aspects are equally important. Realists tend to write about those aspects that have the potential to explain power redistribution, like technological and economic development. Liberals tend to write about those aspects that have the potential to explain the character of interests, like domestic politics and game theory strategies. Once liberalism employs its knowledge on the system level, while realism employs its knowledge on the unit level, then the two theories can achieve a synthesis.